we're going to run tests, is there doesn't seem to be a karma file here. A karma.conf.js is surprisingly missing from what it gave us by default. Oh, and this is going to install Phantom.js too, so that's cool. I've already got it though. Are you done? Nope, now it's done. Alright, so we don't have a conf.js, so we got to run karma init. And that's going to ask us some questions. Yeah, we want to use Jasmine. No, we don't want required JS. Yes, I want Chrome. Blank line means go to the next question. Okay, so it wants to know where my tests are, right? So if I look back here, I can see that everything's in test, spec, and then various things .coffee, but they aren't named spec in the file. So we're going to type test /spec /star/star.coffee. And I don't really want to do that. Yeah, sure, why not? Okay, so now we should have a karma.conf.js, and sure enough we do. Will this work? How do we know? So normally you're going to run karma, you just say karma start, right? Is that what it is? You can also just run it from grunt. There's a grunt test, which basically will just turn around and run karma start. But if you're using a different testing framework, it would do whatever is being run for that particular one. Let's see if this works. I seem to remember there was something else I had to do which was really irritating in order to get it to work. Oh yeah. I actually made a note. Is this going to work? Come on. So they did give us default tests when they when we ran the script. It actually runs a test, tests the main controller. It's going to start Chrome. Now, see, I need a new computer.
Is that your fan?
Yeah, you can hear my fan from all over there. Oh, okay, our tests failed. Why the hell did they fail? Encountered a declaration exception. Module is not defined. Well, why is module not defined? That's a very strange problem. Module is kind of part of Angular, so
Why do you act like you're changing between?
no, I undid that. I undid that. I know actually why this is failing. So I created my this main.coffee file, right, was given to us inside of test, but I think this has to be angular.module. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. But the big thing that's going on here is that the dependencies, which we need in order to run all this stuff inside of our application, are not actually being provided to the test engine. So the runner.html file is missing all of those scripts. Well, it's not this one, though. Which one is it? Now I'm confused.
Is it the karma file?
Are they in here? I can't remember now. Let me look at my other text.
No, it's, yeah, your dependencies are in the karma file. Like for where Jasmine is defined and everything?
Well, it's not Jasmine. It's all the libraries that we've installed via Bower. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we installed via Bower that we need in order to run Karma. Yeah, they do go in here. I'm sorry. This is it. You're right. They're in the Karma conf. So this should probably do it. If we go back over here. Yeah, see, it's only rolling this test spec coffee. That's pretty lame. So let's give it all of this. App scripts, star coffee, star test spec, star. Okay, that looks right, I think. Let's try that. So that list of files that I pulled up there, it looks very similar to the list of dependencies that you'll find in the index.jade file. Now, of course, we don't need SAS to run our tests, so probably not tests, but you're going to need all of these things. So anything basically that you put into here that you're going to need in a test, you got to go over and add it to that. And of course it worked. Main controller is not a function that undefined. I have no idea why that failed. And I don't really want to find out because I'm never going to run these tests again. So let's just get rid of that and start clean. So anyway, if you're going to be using your testing framework, you're going to have to go through a little bit of pain to get that set up if you're using Angular full stack. Now, I think that there are other generator scripts out there that do a better job of setting up the testing stuff initially, but they're trying to remain kind of testing agnostic, and maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should ask you, do you want Jasmine right off the tip? All right, I showed you how to add some dependencies. We talked about Express and Mongo. We talked about Angular UI Router. Oh, I'd installed the wrong version of Angular UI Router. That's why that didn't work. I showed you how to add a controller. All right, so I have this little app that I wrote a couple of weekends ago that I thought I would walk through because it does a couple of interesting things. Let me get into it and start it up first of all. So this was for my wife. She wanted a way to, we're writing all this legal software for her, so she wanted a way to basically get in and be able to create outlines for courses and change them, add things. And I thought, when she told me this, I'm like, there's got to be a JavaScript library that somebody's written that lets you create like a standard, Roman numeral type outlining. I've seen outlining with like the scientific notation and stuff. Could not find anything, so I wound up actually kind of rolling my own to get it to work. And I don't know why there's nothing out there. Maybe everybody just writes their own, and so they don't care about sharing it.
But you should take a look at Concord.
Concord?
Yeah, Concord.
Concord.
It's was written by Dave Miner. It's what powers Spargo.io.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
If outlining is ever an issue for anybody, then you can look at Dave One.
Yeah.
He's obsessed.
You can just use Fargo probably too.
Yeah, probably.
So this is the final version of the app here. Basically, it lets you, has a tree. You can expand and collapse the tree. You can delete nodes. It'll renumber the nodes when you delete them. You can add things. Child. You can delete things. You can also edit stuff. So obviously cannot spell tonight. Whatever. So that's sort of what the final version of what I came up with. So to get here, I basically started, like I usually do, by trying to find something that was as close as possible already that I could steal. And it turned out that there was a guy out there named Nick Perkins, who I actually emailed and got permission to use his stuff. But he has a GitHub project that's a tree directive. And he basically had all of the stuff in Bootstrap already and in Angular to do this stuff here. He had provided a data structure. and he had some code for basically nesting the data and pulling it out recursively and stuff like that. So all I had to do was add the stuff to number it correctly, because he didn't have like Roman numerals or numeric numerals. And I had to, again, I went and stole some code off of Stack Overflow to convert like real numbers to Roman numerals and vice versa. Basically patched it together. I had this up and working in, I don't know, like probably 2 hours, which was probably longer than most of you would take. But I forgot to preface my talk with saying I hadn't used, well, I mean, I used to have a book on my desk about a certain number of years ago that was about this thick that was called the JavaScript Bible, right? It had every single thing in it about JavaScript you would ever need to know was all in a book that was like this thick. I mean, it was that wide, but it was a pretty big book, but that was like everything. It was all in there. And I hadn't really used JavaScript much until about a year ago when I got on the project with these guys over here. So really, I am pretty much a JavaScript neophyte. So, you know, all I can say is that it's very interesting, and I'm really liking it. I have to say, too, we've been doing Backbone for a year. Angular is like a wonderful breeze of fresh air. It is so much easier to work in Angular. And I don't really know why, other than the use of the directives, which is really the most powerful part of Angular, really makes it easier to like see what you're doing as you're putting stuff into the pages. So if we could start over again, I think it would be Angular. All right, so what did I wind up doing here? Really, I only had to add 3 different things. I had to add some data. And to do that, I basically created a model in Mongoose. And this model has the name of the outline and then the info for the outline. Now, if I was going to do this correctly, I probably would not use schema.types.mixed here, but would actually like create some nested documents and stuff. But I was in a hurry, so I just threw this together. I modified this, which came with the generator script. Remember, they actually have the thing generator in here. I just created an outline generator, and I added some outline data. And the format of this data, which is just JSON, is basically the format that Nick has used in his tree data thing. And then I went into the API, added and you can see here where I've got a commented out return of just the data without getting it from the database, but actually we're actually returning the data from the database. So we're just doing a find in Mongo, and we're returning the stuff in the outlines table there. So that part's pretty simple, right? We've got data coming out of the database. We can go here, we can say API/outline, and we can see what our JSON looks like as it's going to come out of the database. So this is going to be our model for our directive that we're going to create in order to make this whole thing work. So that's the server side. So on the JavaScript side, as I said, I've got a directive, which most of this I stole right off of his, I shouldn't say stole, I used his experience and wisdom to make my work easier. Actually, I wound up modifying this quite a bit from its original. But I've got this directive. I've got a filter that I had to create in order to do something kind of funky at the end, which is very simple. And I've got a route for it, the outliner route. It's going to use this onlineview.html and this controller. Okay, so what is this controller doing? Let's talk about that first. The controller is basically going to set some outline data into the scope for the view. We're going to initialize it to a default empty array. We're then going to hit the API. We're going to get that JSON data that we want to provide as the model to the view. and we're going to set that on the scope. This part here was when I was playing around with it without the data, so we could probably just get rid of it altogether now. We've got a couple of methods here that the page is going to need, scope.add and the scope.outline handler. And this outline handler is actually where the bulk of the stuff is going to happen in the directive. So that seems pretty simple, right? We've got some views. We have the outline view that I created. And this is where we're going to invoke the directive. So the directive is called course-outline. And you'll notice this is snake-cased. I don't know why they snake-case some things and they don't other things. Like filters aren't snake-cased, but directives are for some reason. There's four different ways that you can refer to a directive from inside of your view. And you can specify which one you want to use inside of the directive itself, which is this restrict thing here. So this is restricting it to elements. It's EA, I can't remember what they are. I've only seen like E and A actually in use, but if you look at the Angular tutorial on directives, it'll tell you what all that stuff is. We're using a template URL here, so all of the data that's coming in for this particular directive is going to be rendered through this particular template. Now, something I discovered is that if you use template URL, that means it's going to be an AJAX call. There's a URL, I think it's URL just by itself, which will just be a straight up get. But if we want to do an AJAX call here. And then we're going to set our scope. We're going to limit our scope to be these particular things, tree data, onSelect, and init selection. And then all of the magic, basically all of the coding that happens inside of a directive always happens within this link. There's another kind of directive, maybe one of you guys know, is it a module directive? I can't remember. But there is another way you can do this, but I've only ever used the link. So a lot of this is just the code that's making stuff happen inside of there. There's methods for like recursing the tree rows. There's methods for adding the branches to the stuff. There's methods for turning things into Romanized numbers and then turning them back again. There's methods for creating the outline ID that we're going to shove into the data so we know where it is when we pull it out. There's stuff for renumbering when we delete things. So this is basically where the bulk of the work is going on. And that's just plugged in through the directive right here, which has some parameters that it's taking. It wants... ooh, that's interesting. I would think that should be like that. Now I probably broke it. That's the problem with CoffeeScript and all that stuff is their white space, sensitive. Our initial icon leaf is going to be none. On select, we're going to call this method outline handler for the branch, which if you remember was back in our controller. There it is right there. That's going to set this thing in the scope.output, and then that's it. Okay. It's not really needed. So all this stuff is tied together. Is this making sense? I'm just walking through the pieces of this, but they all kind of come together at the end, so that you're hitting your controller. The controller is going to hit the API, get the data. It's then going to load the view. The view is going to fire the directive. It's going to load the view through the route. The view is going to fire the directive. The directive is going to run all this stuff on its link. And the way these work are very interesting because there are two phases, and somebody who knows more about Angular can probably explain this better than me. But there are two phases to every page load. There's the linking phase and the digest phase. And what they do is they go through the DOM and they do the digest on all of the directives that are there. And then they go back and they link all of the data into those digest spots or DOM elements or whatever they are at that point. So it's done as a two-phase thing. And the most common error I think that you'll see as you're working with a digest or a directive is you'll get the, what does it say, digest is already in scope or something like that. The first time you'll see it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what's happening there. And the problem is that the timing inside of the directives is a little bit hard to get sometimes. You have to make sure that you do not actually start loading your view, for example, before you've actually provided the data to the directive that it needs to load. Once it does do so, that was the reason, as a matter of fact. No, it's not there. Now I've forgotten where I did it. There's a place where I set the array. It's probably in the directive, isn't it?
Example course outline equals null there.
Yes, in the scope. Thank you. Why am I not seeing that? I was looking right at it. Thank you.
Scope to it,
Yeah, right there. So we have to set that to an empty array because the first thing that the directive is going to try and do is basically load the page data. And if it gets nothing, I could probably comment this out and show the problem. It's going to blow up. Yeah. Cannot write properly length of undefined because it basically tried to run over an undefined variable there. So what this does is it basically tells it to run over an empty array, and then as soon as the data is added to the scope, it has a watch function that it's going to run. There it is, scope.watch tree data on change, and then it's going to fire that. So basically the directive is constantly listening, and this is how all of the directives work as far as I know in all of Angular. It's basically watching all the time for the model to change, and then when the model changes, it updates its linking again. Which is really cool. It gives you the ability to do things where as you're typing in the screen, it's automatically changing other parts of the screen for you because you're changing the model as you're working. All right, so that all comes together. The last thing I wanted to show was the filter. So let me show you how to include a filter. And that would be in the template, which I haven't showed you yet. Does this all fit if I do that? Sort of. Okay, so this is the template for the directive is running through to build all this data every time. So you can see it's doing an ng repeat on the row and the tree underscore rows. The tree underscore rows is the data that's being created inside of the directive. It's got some animation. It's got some CSS classes it's using. It's got some click events. It's got this little thing here. Now let me take this out just to show you what it looks like. And you should see grunt reload. Thank you, grunt. Okay, so notice that I've got all these dots and extra stuff in here. This is because this field is actually inside of my JSON is what I'm using to track the level that the particular entry in the course outline is at. And if we look at my dummy data, you can see that I'm setting those. So I've got data, and then I've got the outline ID. So it's basically kind of an ID field that says this is where this particular piece of the outline is inside of here. So 1.c in this, or it could be 1.c.a.2. Whatever, ongoing forever and ever in outline format. So I didn't want to display that stuff. So rather than create another piece of data that I would have to also display and then have the actual ID stored somewhere else, I just wrote a filter that basically filters out this stuff. And the filter itself is very simple. There are tons of built-in filters, I should add, too. There's a currency built-in filter. There's a whole bunch of stuff that are just there out of the box. And the way you invoke them is just to use that pipe, like I had there, and then the name of the filter. So you could just say pipe currency on any field that you want to be currency, and it'll just turn it into currency right away. And that comes built in. So this is my own filter that I built. I called it display label. It's not snake cased. I do not know why. That took me a long time to figure out. So here's the filter. We've got our module, the filter. This is the name of the filter. It's going to take an input. We're going to take that input. We're going to split it on the period. And then we're only going to return the last... maybe this, I'm assuming that there's only 3 levels here, possibly. Maybe that's a problem. But then applying this filter, and all I had to do was put it in there as display label, it's going to now reload. Grunt, please.
Did you save the changes?
Yeah, the WebStorm saves them automatically. Come on. Yeah, it did it. I know, my computer is... I need a new computer. First thing Eric says to me, you don't have an SSD drive. He just watched me type one thing. I'm a second-class citizen.
You should get yourself an SSD drive.
I should. Someone should pay for that. All right. That's it. I think that's enough. We've been here an hour and a half. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So, did you run into any weird problems using Jade along with Angular? That was one of my fears using some kind of HTML preprocessor along with something like Angular. I was afraid all the special characters like double curlies and whatever would interfere with the preprocessor.
There have been a couple of times where I've been a little bit stumped as to how to do something in Jade. But I've pretty much figured it out eventually, and I attribute that to just me being a newbie with Jade. But I've been able to get it all to work eventually. Actually, putting in the directive in Jade was a little bit tricky because I had an example of how to do it in HTML, and I just jaded that and then put that in, and that didn't work. So then I had to start playing with it a little bit. So I think there are going to be situations that you run into where you got to like kind of dig into it a little bit. It's like using stylus for CSS, for example. There are places where you got to go look at the API and to know what you're doing. But for the most part, yeah, it's just straight up, very simple to understand. They use the pipe symbol to basically mean continuation of an element. That's a little bit tricky at first, but for the most part.
You have to escape it or something? If you're using it the way Angular uses it, you have to escape it in Jade or something like that?
No, nothing like that at all. Okay, so like if you've got like an anchor tag, right, and you want to start the anchor tag, you want to end the anchor tag, but on the same row you want to include some other element that isn't part of the anchor tag. That was a little tricky for me, but I eventually figured that out. Because Jade basically it's like every line of code is basically going to correspond to a new line in your view, just to kind of keep things straight. But I don't know. I'm a newbie with it, but people that I trust have said use it, and I've really enjoyed using it. It makes your HTML look so much cleaner and so much easier to understand. And maybe it seems easier to understand because I'm used to that syntax in Sass or Stylus, but I mean, would you say I'm wrong?
I can't use anything else.
Yeah. It's kind of like CoffeeScript. Once you start learning CoffeeScript, it's like I can't write JavaScript anymore. Even though I know JavaScript's a real language and CoffeeScript isn't.
How would you compare something like Jade to something like Haml, for example?
Jade is based on top of Haml. It's almost all of its work is Haml, really, under the covers. So
what does it add to him?
I think just the white spacing syntax stuff.
I thought the
I don't know
Hamlet
really.
has
I don't
the
know.
white spacing too.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, they're really similar.
Similar?
Any other questions?
Lots How do you like WebStorm?
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
So we're having a presentation next month on WebStorm.
Oh, nice. Yeah, 'cause I was gonna buy it.
It's worth it. Yeah, no, it's worth it. Though, Alan got it for like $10 somehow on some deal. So he's like on some site where like, you know, they give you the deal of the day or whatever. Yeah. So he's like, I had to buy it. It was $10. I'm like, well, shit, yeah. But I paid the full amount for it. And
Yeah, it's like $50.
yeah.
And it's got pretty good Angular support too, right?
It does. It does. It seems to have support for everything as near as. And I use IntelliJ most of the time.
Okay.
So I was already familiar with stuff. The one thing in the latest version of WebStorms, I don't know why they did this, but Shift Command F now gets you the text define, whereas in IntelliJ it's Shift Control F. So I have to like remember every time. But maybe IntelliJ 13 is changing as well. I don't know. I was unhappy they changed the keyboard
Too
shortcut.
bad that the upgrade price is nearly the full price for it.
Oh, it always is. But if you bought it, we bought it within the last 60 days.
We probably have two versions behind it.
This is version 7. You're using version 7 of WebStorm.
You know, I don't even know.
All the way over there, I think, under WebStorm.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, about WebStorm. Go one.
There we go. 7.
Yeah, you're the latest. Thank you very much.
Sure.